Is our new member Chris here from last week? Any chance? Somebody should tell him I will be his other Meredith. He's married to a Meredith.
Oh, he is?
I stand here before you as the fourth woman in the club, the Portland Rotary Club. We're not going to do this in order. I don't know who comes after me. I'm delighted to share the Rotary year 52-53. Because I wasn't here in chronology, you're just going to have to slip back in time. It happens to be a perfectly good year for me to do, because that year my grandfather was a Rotarian in Cambridge, and my father was president of the Rotary Club in Hingham, Massachusetts. So I thought I would start with some of the fun things that went on that year, and I know sports are really important to this group. Mickey Mantle hit his first Grand Slam home run. Rocky Marciano KO'd Jersey Joe Walcott for the heavyweight title. This is going to upset a lot of people. The Yankees tied their own record of 4 consecutive World Series wins. In politics, Nixon gave his checkers speech. Eisenhower defeated Adlai Stevenson to become President of the United States. And for the first time ever, the inauguration speech was broadcast live. Other firsts for that year: non-stop Pacific flight by jet, first broadcast of American Bandstand, although Dick Clark didn't start until '55. And Clarence Birdseye sold his first frozen peas. Less than a year after Lucy was allowed to use the word pregnant on I Love Lucy, the first human birth was televised live. Killer fogs in London gave rise to the new word smog. And important to Roger Fagan, I bet he knows this, the first transistorized hearing aid was offered for sale, 1953. Internationally, thermonuclear bomb was detonated in the Marshall Islands. And this one I had never heard of. An American B-52 accidentally dropped a nuclear weapon 15,000 feet on Mars Bluff, South Carolina. Anybody here heard of that? Yes, some of you are older than I am. It created a crater about 75 feet across, but the nuke didn't detonate because of the safety catches. There were 6 safety catches. That year, Joseph Stalin was buried in Moscow 8 days after having a stroke. And astounding to me, the Tuskegee Institute reported in 1952 as the first year in 71 years without a lynching in the U.S. Most important for Rotary, Dr. Jonas Salk announced a vaccine to prevent polio. In 1952, 57,600 Americans contracted polio, and in that same year, 3,000 Americans died of it. I'd like to add a personal note about polio in that my family participated in the Polio Pioneers. This actually happened in 1954, but it ties in with him having just announced that he had it. 1.8 million children began this test in US and Canada and Finland, and certain towns were in it. It was the first time the now standard double-blind method was used, where neither the patient nor the attending doctor knew who got the vaccine or the placebo. My sister Lynn, my brother Randy, both Rotarians, were participants in those 1954 trials. So, now I get to Rotary in that year. I determined that, from listening to other years also, that the minutes of the meeting don't talk much about fundraising until much more recent years. We know that they must do some fundraising, but they were not things that were brought up in meetings, so therefore probably done by committee. There was no mention of the meetings in that entire Rotary year, but the Treasurer's report notes, quote, "The books for the year show a balance between 1,000 and 1,100. How's that for precise accounting? They had a ladies' night. They had 2 golf and dinner get-togethers at the country club. Community service projects. The club gave an award for a playground equipment to the playground providing the most interesting program for children during the summer. Letter of thanks was read for providing headsets and cords to the Maine Marine Hospital. Contributions of $50 to Portland Hearing Society for Children. It's apparently in our DNA. Rotarians collected their register slips from George C. Shaw Company to be redeemed for sets of stainless flatware. 125 sets were amassed for the Rotary training camp at Camp Hines. Youth service, a meeting was provided by the officers of Boys Rotary at Portland High, featuring boys and girls, and it represented many schools. 36 local students were guests of Rotary for 3 months. Vocational service, George E. Coleman came to speak to Rotary about the poultry industry and surprised everybody by giving everyone a chicken. It was silent as to whether it was dressed or undressed. There were some very interesting speakers, some of them you've heard of before. John Calvin Stevens II gave a speech called More Than a Blueprint. Sumner Bernstein gave a talk on a lawyer's responsibility. Richard Nixon, candidate for Vice President of the United States, spoke at a joint meeting of Rotary, Kiwanis, Lions, Altrusa, Reciprocity, Zonta, and Seroptimus. 583 paid lunches were served. They said nothing else about the speech. To those of you taking notes, there's some things more important than others. Reverend Henry Sims talked on One Anthropologist Looks at Evolution. He has his doubts about evolution because there's so little direct evidence for it and because the history of science is a history of discarded ideas. Walter Burke was instructive in a talk about the economy of Greece, which could have been written a month ago, a lightly restrained bureaucracy which resorts to graft and corruption. And Gordon D. Hall, the title of his message was Hate Campaigns of Today's Professional Bigots. Organized bigotry is not on the wane. Those are from their notes. Other interesting tidbits, many meetings focused on the recent conflicts in both Europe and Korea. Many, many, many music programs. A quote from one of them, "The pianists were late, but whoever pitched America put her right over the plate." Dues were raised from 40 to 50. Ed Nelson, who many of you will remember, gave almost all the invocations. They didn't salute the flag, they toasted it. And our dear old Al Milliken was honored for 6 years of perfect attendance.
Thank you, Meredith, for that wonderful account. Well, let's toast some